Okay, we are recording. Yay.
Yay.
So hello, foster love families. Welcome. This is the birth parent panel portion of the retreat. And with me, I have 3 birth parents, and this hour is going to be all about them. My facilitation and kind of interview style is very conversational. So I'll introduce each of them and allow them to share a few words, but then we're just really going to kick off into conversations. This is less about just telling you all about their story and more about us together talking about birth parents. And inherently throughout that conversation, we'll learn about their story to as much as they are comfortable sharing. But really, this is designed to be a free-flowing conversation that you, foster parents, adoptive parents, just get a glimpse into. So welcome. And let's have Jennifer, Jessica, and Rita in that order share, first of all, this term birth mom. Some people use it, some people like it, some people don't. Some people say first parents. Tell me how you refer to yourself in this conversation, and if you are in an open adoption, which I know not all of you are, but if you are, how does your child refer to you? So Jennifer, start us off.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I personally don't have a preference for the title that people use on me, so I typically just mirror what other birth mothers or first moms happen to be using around me. But for this context, I'll use birth mom, and I'll stick with that just to keep some consistency here. I am in a closed adoption, so I don't have the honor of my child calling me by a certain title.
Thank you. Jessica.
Hello, everybody. I do go by birth mom. It just feels like the right fit for me. I am in a semi-open adoption with my daughter, and so there's limited contact. The family knows my name, I know their name. We met whenever I was pregnant with her, and they were able to be there at the hospital as well. So that's a little bit about me. I'm not sure, actually. So she's 9 going on 10 years old right now, and I'm not sure what she refers to me as at this point.
Rita.
I'm in an open adoption, and he refers to me as his birth mom.
Thank you. So as we get this conversation started, I would love for each of you, if you feel inclined, to follow up with someone else if you have a question for them, and be talking to each other, not necessarily needing to just respond to my question, but go wherever you want to go with it, and then just jump in if you have like, oh, that really resonates with me, here's my story around that, or tell me more, what did you mean? Free flowing amongst each other. This is really exciting for me because I am an adoptee, and I feel a lot of my work is centered around strengthening and amplifying adoptee voices, which for me, that means not only getting our voices out there, hopefully to an equal amount in the media as adoptive parents, but having our perspectives be believed. Talking with each of you, I feel that you are even less than adoptees in the sense of your voices being heard, that birth parents really are silenced, but I don't think silent. I don't think it is that birth parents are being quiet, but that society has a hard time listening to your voices and accepting your complex realities. Does that jive with you? Does that make sense to you, or is it a different experience? In no particular order.
That's been my experience. I mean, birth moms have been striving fervently for years to get a seat at the triad table. And we're just now being invited. And some of us are taking our time to take a seat, and other of us are showing up. with our great boisterous voices that we've had all the whole time. And some of us are taking a seat with quivering lips and just tears rushing down our faces. So to have this opportunity to speak, to have our stigmatized voices be heard and honored, it is treasured beyond what I can articulate.
Yeah, I think that it's the forgotten aspect of the triad often. There's the birth happens, and then this is, the family that continues on, I think, for a lot of people's perspective. And so I think that's dead on what you're talking about, Angela. Yeah, I don't know. It's certainly the most quiet voice when you think about adoption, for sure. And I think that there's still a lot of stigma around birth parents and what that looks like and what sort of life experience someone must be in to make an adoption plan. And yeah, I think there's still, unfortunately, a lot of stigma associated with that.
I'm going to want to talk about that. Both Jennifer and Jessica, you both mentioned the word stigma. I want to get there. Rita, what are your thoughts about being kind of an oppressed, marginalized voice? Oh, she's stuck.
I feel there is a huge stigma. I also feel that there is so much support for adoptive parents that there's not as much support for birth moms, in my experience.
Let's get into the stigma. What is the stigmas, and what is your truth? What are some common things that we hear about birth parents at large? Rita, I think about you and your age, and this might not be a stigma, but the stereotypes that birth parents are 17 years old in high school. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's usually, young women that, got pregnant and placed their child. That's not my truth.
Tell me about that.
Or, or they're on drugs or whatever. I know for myself, it was a relationship that wasn't very long, and I found myself pregnant and, had to make a hard choice after I had parented two children already. So,
and what age were you at that time?
I was, let's see, I was like 30, I was 39 and a half when I had my son. So
I work in the adoption field, so I work with an array of women who are choosing adoption. And really the only word that I can attest to adoption is complex. And so far my experience, not only in my own story, but the stories of the women that I've had the honor of walking with them, is love. They have loved their child so much that they recognize the shortcomings in their own environment and sometimes in themselves, and they lay their desire to be a parent down in order to lift their child up. And it's such an honor to work with women of 39 years old and the typical 17-year-old. I mean, there's no typical age, I would say.
And tell me about you. Was that true for you when you chose?
That was true for me. Actually, it's not typical for teenagers to place, because the immature mindset is, I keep the baby, I keep the boy. I have a derivation wound where my father didn't pour into me. So I knew on a very small scale what it was like to long for the love of my father to be tangibly shown to me. And I knew the biological father of my child was not capable of being the father that I felt she deserved. That's why I chose placement at 17, because I had that unique perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I'm sort of similar experience as you, where I was, and I'm going back and forth in my head now, if I was 20, 19 or 20. Um, but I was in college, and the relationship or lack thereof was not one that I felt would be what I wanted for my daughter. And it wasn't right for me either. And, I actually found out that I was pregnant on the ending of that relationship or whatever it was. And so it just felt like she deserved something different. And for me, what felt like something better. And personally, I haven't looked back. I think it was the exact right choice for her. Yeah.
I like how you say different. And I acknowledge too that I didn't necessarily give my daughter a better life, though it was my full intent and prayerfully I hope she has a better life. But ultimately what I did was give her, and you as well, and you, Rita, is a different life.
What are some other stigmas that you hear other people say that don't reflect your relationship, your experience?
Oh, there was.
Oh, go ahead.
No, there's so much. When I was pregnant, like I said, I was on a college campus. I actually was an athlete at a major university, and knew a lot of people. And so it was a very public pregnancy. Obviously, I stopped doing sports, competing at that time. And everyone had something to say about it's remarkable. I think when you're pregnant and birthing a child that you're going to have, grow up in your care, in your family, people have opinions, and add on to the fact, I'm making an adoption plan for oh my gosh, you're going to see that baby and you're going to change your mind. There's no way. You better bring a car seat to it's just, I was like, wow, you have a lot of really strong opinions about what's going to happen for this baby in my womb.
So Jessica, it sounds like you were really open about the fact that you would choose adoption when you were showing, that you chose to tell people that you were going to choose adoption.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Tell me about that choice. Was it ever a thought for you not to share that, or were you like...
It happened fast for me. I found out I was pregnant. I freaked out. I got connected to some really great folks who helped me kind of level out and figure out what was going to be the right plan for moving forward. And that all happened within 24 hours. And I really didn't hesitate from that point moving on. And like I said, I was in school. I had no intention of stopping school. I was on a sports team, and I intended to return to that sports team, and I did, and I wasn't going to have a child in my care. So I didn't have a need to keep it. It didn't feel practical, but it was where I was at, and I was going to be open about that with folks. So,
yeah. What were you going to say, Jennifer? When I had asked about other things that you hear that don't reflect your experience as a birth mom.
Oh, okay. So never personally have I heard this, but this is just the cultural stigma of the USA that birth mom and bad mom are synonyms. Which is not always the case at all. And I too decided that I was going to be open with my choice for adoption. And in fact, I was pregnant during Mother's Day. And I remember when the pastor called for all the mothers to stand, and I with great gusto stood, even though I knew I was making this adoption choice, because yes, I have the word birth in front of mom, but I'm still this child's mother, even though I'm not going to parent her.
Rita, can you think of anything that you hear people talk about in adoption land about birth parents that doesn't really jive with your experience?
That we don't love our kids, that we just gave them up. You know, we didn't want them, that kind of thing.
And that's not true for you.
No.
Tell me about that.
No, if I could have it any other way, I would definitely have parented and took care of my child. It often comes with grief, a lot of grief and loss.
And I want to talk a little bit about that grief because Jennifer, you mentioned earlier on, you used the word quivering lips, you know, that our voices are muted, but that we are coming to the table to speak, but sometimes with quivering lips. Why?
So this stigma has chains around our hands that has disenfranchised grief along with it.
Tell us what that means.
A disenfranchised grief is a very deeply rooted grief that our society does not recognize as authentic. So we have this loss. Rather, our society wants to acknowledge that this is a true loss of our children. And choice does not negate grief.
And a true loss as opposed to what?
What I mean by that is society doesn't necessarily view adoption as a loss of a child. They just view it as, well, you're a bad mom. You couldn't take care of your kids, so what do you care? Which is not even remotely the truth in my story and many other women's stories. Mm-hmm. And having this disenfranchised grief, it's so hard to find support systems that will honor this loss and this grief that you carry. So birth mothers like Rita and I have connected and chatted a little bit after a previous Zoom call, just to pour into each other, to be there for each other. And it's not a aspect of motherhood that any little girl grows up thinking, you know, I'm going to be a birth mom when I grow up. But it is such a beautiful, amazing group of women that love fiercely.
Yeah. When I think about disenfranchised grief or ambiguous loss, I usually think about funerals and how for society it is so accepted when someone passes away to have a memorial, to have a service, to invite people in, and everyone comes together, grieves together. People might choose to dress a certain way, wearing dark clothes, but that's all societally acceptable. But that a loss of a child, or for me as an adoptee, a loss of my mother, is oftentimes seen as the opposite. Like, this is great. This child's going to get to go to a better place, not different place like you guys spoke to. And so let's all celebrate. And yeah, where does that leave you, Jennifer, Jessica, and Rita, to talk more about that loss and what are you doing? And I want to talk a little bit about, Jennifer, your retreats that you offer, but also what does it look like on those days that I'm sure really fire it up, like your child's birthday, Mother's Day. Those days, I would guess, bring a lot of emotion. What do you do with that?
Yeah, so I also am an adoptee. And so as you talked about that experience of the loss of relation with the birth parent from that perspective, and that, so they strike to me as very similar, because it's one of those things, and even the comparison to a funeral where there is at least something, you know, societally acceptable where we come together, we have these rituals around honoring life. But even after that, like you said, there's the holidays, there's the milestones, Christmas and 16th birthday, and they're just all these, it's a very complex grief, is what I was thinking of as you talked about, you know, those, it's complicated, it's very complicated, and it is long lasting. You know, you don't just kind of get over it. I was sad at first and now I've forgotten. You don't forget. That's a piece of you, literally.
Mhm. Mhm. Rita, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, usually I go to a support group here in Pennsylvania, and we normally have a couple times a year that we get together for dinner or whatever. And one of them is around Mother's Day. So I kind of feel a little bit celebrated. So I think for me personally, since I have two kids that I parent, it looks a little bit different. But definitely on his birthday, I do feel like I have to do something kind of to memorialize it.
What kind of thing do you do?
Take care of myself, or plan something special,
Mm-hmm.
celebrate with friends, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Every year on my daughter's birthday, I have a really, really tough time. Even just talking about it, I'm probably going to get teary-eyed. So excuse my quivering lips as I try to articulate through this.
We want to embrace the quivering lips.
Yes.
We want to give you this platform with all that it comes with, which
Thank
is
you.
yes.
I appreciate you honoring my emotions in this. So every year for her birthday, about a week before, I tell my support system, this monumental day is coming up. I need you. This is what I need in order to be loved well during this time. And I remind my husband that he needs to pick up a cake the day of, and he needs to have candles and lighters ready because we do a birthday celebration every year. And then we sit around the table, not to put any expectations on my daughter, but just to honor her, my children that I parent, and my husband, we talk about, what do we think she's doing now? Like when she turned 16, oh, do you think that she's gotten her license? Do you think she's scooting around town, seeing her friends? Just keeping her memory alive and well, and honoring my children that I parent too, so that if we do get the immaculate privilege of meeting my daughter, that won't be a culture shock to them, that she will be well known and well loved within these walls.
Wow. Yes. I love that. As an adoptee, it makes me feel some sort of way. And I wonder, it makes me feel I'm projecting onto you a little bit, in the sense that hearing my birth mother say what you just said, and knowing that she has quivering lips talking about me, would make me feel so loved in a way that I may not have been sure my whole life. Those questions, does she really love me? To think she's celebrating me every year is so lovely. A lot of adoptive and foster parents are going to be listening to this, watching this, and probably wondering, what can I do? And I know, Jennifer, you have a closed adoption, so it's a little bit hypothetical, but is there room for adoptive parents of your child to be present on those tough days? So this is a question larger than just openness in general, but this is more of a question about supporting you and recognizing that ongoing grief. Is there a role for the adoptive parents in supporting you, or does it need to be separate?
Yeah, so as an adoptee, I put that hat on, absolutely, big time, and I always say my adoptive parents, they weren't perfect by any stretch, but they did pretty good as it relates to how they talked about my birth parents, the sort of narrative around what happened, why it happened. It was never anything negative. It was a closed adoption. And even, doing it, quote, well, I still around those kind of mile marker times, or even, you know, just random times. Like, I wonder what she's doing right now. I wonder if they're still alive. I wonder if they're okay. I wonder, and it's maybe more my own stuff. I was always too nervous to broach that conversation with them, in fear of hurting them, in fear of, you know, I don't want them to think that I don't think they're enough. So I had that all internally happening regularly. And that's with them doing it, quote, what I would think of as pretty well. So I think, you know, my message there is, even if they're not, I don't know, you know, really upset, vocalizing that, there's a strong chance they're still having some internal thoughts at any given time about the family that they originally were born into and came from.
What about with your birth mom hat on? Like, how would it feel if your kid's adoptive parents sent you a card in the mail? I know there's a birth parents day, the day after Mother's Day. If they send you a card in the mail on that day saying, we're thinking of you, does that feel good, or does that feel, what would that mean?
Yeah, that would feel great. And I, you know, they're awesome. When it's around her birthday, they send pictures and holidays and things like that. And I think it's just that, oh, they didn't forget about me. That's nice to know. Like I said, it is semi-open. We're not, you know, pen pals texting every day, but just sort of on those milestones, they reach out, which every time I'm like, I'm so thankful. Thank you so, you know, so much just for, you know, giving me a peek into what's going on. Let me know that she's okay, that you all are okay.
What do you do with those photos? Do they get thrown away after a week, or are they treasured?
Oh yeah. I pull them out, and again, you know, just randomly I pull them out, show that, you know, every time I get them, I show my husband, like, look at her, she's not a baby anymore. And you know, with the people that were around me and supported me, you know, through that process, that, you know, they get to see them every year too, and just get to kind of share and how big she's getting. And, you know, you're a part of it, and that's really my view on this whole thing. It's not this family is here and it ends here and now this family starts here. We're all family. We're all connected through this child, and, you know, more family equals better in my perspective. You know, there's nothing, how is that bad? I got more moms, more dads. It's great. You know, it's a village. It takes a village. So it just lets me know I'm not forgotten, which feels great.
Rita, what about you in the same vein?
Well, it's, my adoption is with family, so it creates certain challenges because you think family should think about you, remember you, whatever. However, it's not like that. I don't know. We do have open communication. We do have visits. But as far as getting pictures and updates, is usually I have to ask for them. And I just think it's my sister-in-law who isn't that type of person. That's not her personality to remember those type of things, which is fine on some level. You know, you have to kind of give grace and, you know, remember that we're all individual. But it creates, for me, I think it's created an expectation that, well, I don't understand why they just wouldn't remember me, or, you know, why they just wouldn't automatically send a picture. So, you know, it's learning through that and kind of fostering a relationship that is comfortable.
comfortable meaning comfortable for all members of the triad, not necessarily what you may really want, if you could have your say, if it wasn't as,
Exactly.
use Jennifer's words, complex as it actually is. Something I think
Exactly.
both for you, Rita, and Jennifer, is my adoptive parents sent my birth mother pictures and letters of me growing up every year, but it went to the agency and it never got to her because they couldn't find her. And so when she and I met, when I was 26 years old, we would be walking around and she would see a Black baby girl in someone's arms and she would just lock eyes on that baby, thinking it was her baby. That since she didn't get to see me grow up and see those milestones, it seems like she kind of got stuck in that moment of the trauma, the moment I was left. And it's hard for me because I'm an adult and I'm here, but she doesn't recognize me as her daughter because she missed all those moments. How does that make you feel, Jennifer, being in a closed adoption, hearing that story or hearing that Jessica gets these photos? What does that feel like?
As an Enneagram 2, that makes me want to scoop your mama up and just love her so well through that, and scoop you up and love you well, and just, I wish trauma didn't exist, but here we are.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to pour in real quick to what Rita was saying about comfortable for all members.
Yeah.
The majority of states in America do not have contract agreements for post-placement visits. It's all a gentleman's agreement. So authentically, us birth moms are tiptoeing, that have open adoptions, are tiptoeing around in many of their personal triad memberships to cater and make sure that we don't say the wrong thing. And we, I mean collectively, the gals who are in those type of relationships, not myself, obviously.
Sure.
To make sure that those doors aren't closed, because we have no legal bearing promising us that we can have access to see our children grow up. And
yeah, so not only is your voice oppressed, but literally within the law, if there is a contract agreement, there's little likelihood that you'd be able to fight if you didn't get the visits that were outlined.
Right.
What does it mean when you say tiptoeing, don't want to say the wrong thing?
This is not my personal experience, but many of the birth mom groups that I have been in, a lot of the women have said, I had this relationship planned out and this is now what this looks like, which is nothing like what I wanted to have. Or some women articulate that they want to go to their chosen adoptive parents and say, you know, I chose this during a time of great trauma. I wasn't in the right headspace at that time. I didn't know I needed more. And now I know I need more. And they're so fearful to articulate this because more might end up being less.
I know in Pennsylvania that we can have a contract, and that happened probably 10 to 15 years ago. But I'm not sure about fighting for what you agreed upon, how that would look, because I don't have a contract with family.
Yeah.
I'm in Ohio, and it's just a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah,
Okay.
I distinctly remember going through the process with the birth parent counselor, and she said, you know, we're going to outline it. And I remember I was like really struggling with how much openness I wanted to ask for. And sort of as a assurance, she said, this isn't a legally binding contract, just to be clear. So if you say this now and then want to ask for change later, that's something that would have to be negotiated, but there's nothing binding about this. So it is the case in Pennsylvania as well.
Wow. Any feelings of jealousy towards adoptive parents, that they get to see your children every day, tuck them into bed? Is that something that crosses your mind?
that never crossed my mind, the jealousy part of it, but I definitely struggled with, do I still exist to my daughter?
Yeah.
Do I matter to her? I never pinned in on the adoptive parents in that way. I always felt like I couldn't step up, and they stepped up to nurture what's not theirs by nature. And I was so grateful to them for doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't say jealous either. I spent a long time, again, having the privilege of getting to select the family and meet the family. And I went through a lot of those profile things.
Profile.
Yes. And I remember at one point being like, am I being too picky? And then at some point I was like, screw that. This is my baby. You know? And,
you were really, you got to be in control, which is not something that I hear a lot of birth parents say, is that this time for you was, you were in the driver's seat.
I had the most phenomenal birth parent counselor I could ever speak of. She's remarkable and really empowered me throughout the process. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. As it should be. I hate that that's not the norm, but lovely.
I wouldn't say jealous. I would say a little bit of envy that they get to see him on a daily basis. That I don't get to participate in special moments at times. You know, for example, graduating preschool or, you know, graduating kindergarten, that kind of thing. But I know that I'm fortunate for the time that I do have with him, because you typically don't see birth parents being involved in family occasions. So being with family, I definitely have my share of time with him.
Alone time? One-on-one time?
Yeah. Yes.
That's really special.
Yes. I'm very grateful for that. And that started probably after he was 2, that I got to take him for the day and, you know, go to the park or whatever it is.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Many adoptive parents struggle with how to talk to their child about the reasons behind their need for being adopted. And I think this is part of the stigma piece. Because when I speak with birth parents, there seems to be an ease to which birth parents talk about that time period a little bit and saying, like, this is what happened and this is my choice. For the adoptive parents, it doesn't come out as easy and smooth as that. Do you know what I mean? For adoptive parents, it's like, I just don't know what to say about why your birth parents couldn't keep you. What do you say to that discrepancy?
As far as the discrepancy goes, I'm not sure, but I would tell adoptive parents, encourage them to acknowledge the grief that their mother has, that they weren't able to have them with her, or him or her with her, and talk about how that makes them feel, and don't be afraid of the emotions, because being emotionally intelligent parents pouring into children makes you the safe place, makes you the place where they can articulate when they're feeling sad or grief or what have you about their adoption. And as Jessica mentioned previously, don't wait until they're talking. Talk to them.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's this tendency for adoptive parents to want, for some people, some adoptive parents, to want to uplift their kids' birth parents in their home, speak well of them. But how do they do that if they know there was a time period that was bad, negative. I think this is where some of that language comes from, that they did a bad thing, when really it's not always the case, right? Set that straight a little bit.
We can recognize that adoptive children go through trauma and that certain behaviors in children are there because of trauma. But then when we look at the birth families, we attest bad rather than trauma to them.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, and my truth is, even if I were 15 and on drugs and whatever else we want to conjure up about me, I'm still not bad. I'm still a human who gave birth and carried another human and made a choice that then allowed you to have a child in your family that you get to call your own. And so I think, so that's what's just going on in my head. I think we can have that reaction to be like, well, that wasn't my story. Even if it was, even if you're an adoptive parent, if it was, you're an adoptive parent because this individual, this birth mother, made a choice, or whatever happened, maybe it was less than a choice that led to you having this child as be part of your family. So that's just going to my head. I think the difficulty oftentimes for adoptive parents is probably driven by one, wanting to protect their baby, and, from a lot of messy, hard, complicated emotions. And they think if we don't talk much about it, then maybe they just won't think about it or be affected by it. And two, I would imagine probably a little fear. I did find my birth parents when I was 23. And I remember telling my mom and dad, and that's a whole whirlwind of another story, that, largely is great, but I went to visit them, and there was this, I remember from my adoptive mother, you're going to leave me and never come back. And I was like, oh, not even maybe, you're my mom. And I want to go over here and meet my other mom and see what that's about. But there was definitely some fear.
And you touched on something really key. I think there's a dehumanization element of birth parents from society. That birth parents are kind of these faceless people who we kind of want to keep in the shadows, instead of birth parents are like you three, who we want to, like, I just want to go to a coffee shop and chat for hours together. That isn't the picture that people usually think first. And that's why I'm so excited to amplify your quivering lips. Rita, what are you thinking?
I think there's some fear around, being totally honest with the child that's adopted. However, I would think, like Jessica was saying, that it's a choice. For me, it was a choice. It wasn't like, the state came in and said, no, you can't have this child. And at the end of the day, I remember I had a choice. I had a choice of a different family. But it all changed in the hospital. And I mean, I knew what was going to happen in the hospital. I knew that my child was going to go home with my brother and my sister-in-law. However, I necessarily didn't think that they would be the adoptive family. And really kind of debating on, well, okay, they've already, kind of attached to him, and I don't want him moved around how many different times, and I didn't want that trauma for my child. So you know,
Mm.
it looks different for me on many levels. I remember going through profile books and that kind of thing, but I couldn't move forward because of the birth dad wasn't on the same page. So
But even Rita, what you're saying, it mirrors what Jennifer started with talking about how much love we have for our child. Just you going through all of those decisions, like my brother and sister-in-law are starting to attach, my child's starting to attach to them. Another move would mean this for the child, and all of those decisions and thoughts are things that we don't often hear, and therefore the common narrative isn't yet that my birth mom just cared so much for me. It's interesting because I think that falls into just the parenting bucket. Like there's so much in parenting that parents don't get any kudos for, but they're doing out of such love, and it makes me want to take off that word birth and just think you three are parents. You're doing what's in the best for your child without any need for like a 5-year-old to say, hey mom, thanks for thinking of me in all these different ways, because they don't do that.
Well,
right.
Speaking of motherhood, I'm an awesome mom to my 3 kids that I parent. I love them well. They're well fed. They're well loved. They have a great dad that plays with them. He's so intentional with them. And something that I think that maybe a lot of adoptive parents don't think about is the lament that these adoptees are going to have if they happen to come back to closed adoptions and see these moms that are healthy and happy. And this is what I missed out on. But authentically, that's not what you missed out on. And it's only because we placed you that we were able to get our lives back together. Because had we kept our children, many of us would have been nowhere near the women that we are today. And I think that is something that needs to be honored for adoptees, that just because they see this wonderful, beautiful woman ready to have a relationship with them, that doesn't mean that there's going to be mass amounts of grief.
It's a great point that comes up a lot, and I hear from adoptive parents is, oh my goodness, my child's birth parent now has 2 more kids. She's raising, loving them. She's stable, has a job and XYZ, and how is my child ever going to make sense of that? But I love the way you frame it, that if not for this happening, it may not have allowed for you to be in this place today. Who knows? And all of that is complicated. There's not a good, clear answer. That's again, the word of the hour. Jennifer, I wanted you to touch on these retreats that you hold for birth parents and what support means to each other. I supported my birth mother by sending her to a retreat with other birth parents, and the difference in who she was before she left for this retreat and knowing 0 birth parents, birth moms, and when she got back 5 days later, it was unbelievable, the lightness that my mom, all of us saw in her. What must have happened? What happens at these retreats?
So this is going to be our first year, and of course COVID came in, so now we're on Zoom. So the way that I have this retreat set up is, it's not just, and I don't want just to indicate that less than by any means, but it's not, for lack of better wordage, it's not just birth moms coming together. It is speakers and panels, and so that we can grow and learn. And another huge factor in it is, I know there's other birth mom retreats, but I've been to birth mom activities that were not faith-based. And for me, that's draining. That's very, very draining. And I knew if I feel this way, there has to be other women out there that feel that way too. And so I searched, and I didn't find anything in my area that was faith-based. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. There's a need. I don't necessarily feel fully equipped, but I feel that I serve a God that calls the unequipped and equips them. So about a year and a half, I've been planning this with an awesome team, and it's coming together. I have an adult adoptee and a marriage, family, and therapist coming in to talk about trauma responses and self-care plans specifically tailored to Enneagram numbers. I have an adoptive mom panel coming on to answer questions that birth moms have always wanted to ask but are nervous to ask or don't have access to asking, like me.
Yes.
So I just really hope it's this beautiful and healing experience where these women don't just focus on the trauma and loss of their adoption, but they focus on the hope in their stories.
Is there anything anyone can do that's watching to support this, to make sure it comes to fruition?
Absolutely. So Fireweed Retreat on Facebook, if you want to go on there and share my post to get the word out to birth mamas out there that I may not have access to, that can come onto the Zoom call this year. It is in Vermilion, Ohio next year, which is northern Ohio, kind of near Cedar Point, if that gives you a little bit better of a reference of where we are. So that will kind of narrow down who's able to go there. But this year, definitely, we're quite open. In fact, we have a birth mom coming from New Zealand, setting an alarm for 1 a.m. to be there. So I am so honored that she's doing that. And finances, we definitely need people who have a heart for adoption to come alongside us and bless us with their finances. I am fully equipped to do 20 people total. That's including my staff. So that's 13 birth mamas for next year. I have 37 so far this year for Zoom. So there is a need. If I could.
The need is huge.
Yes. If I could have more funding, I could invite more birth mamas. So that.
And can
can
people donate if they go to your Facebook page?
They can, or they can go to fireweed613.com, which 613 is Isaiah 61:3, which is beauty from ashes.
Talk about support, what that looks like for you, Rita. I know it sounds like you and Jennifer connected after our first call. What else? What kind of support do you have? What kind of support do you still need? Does it feel like a void to try to find it?
Well, I mean, I go to a support group. It usually meets monthly, depending on the participation. And it's very mind-boggling to me that there's sometimes just two of us, meaning the birth mom, the counselor, and another birth mom. And I think here in Pennsylvania, there wasn't a lot of support. I kind of have built my support with people from church, and just reaching out to other birth moms on Instagram or Facebook or whatever the case is. I also follow Ashley Mitchell, who is Big Tough Girl, that has podcasts and does a retreat as well. So I think it's great that some of these birth moms have stepped up to facilitate a retreat. It's wonderful.
What's most helpful in any of that? In the birth parent support group you attend, where sometimes it's just two people, what is it that you get from it?
Well, to be heard and to validate your feelings, I would say, mostly. I also think that, hearing others and other experiences and realizing that I have a much different experience and how fortunate I am to have my experience.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, what about you?
So I don't I can think of one other individual who I know who's a birth mother, and that's really it, local to my area. Um, I think anytime, it's such a unique experience that whenever you connect with folks who have this experience, even when it's really different, there's still like this instant kind of strong connection, like this you get me, and you see me, and I see you in a way that I think other people just might not be able to. So I so applaud you, Jennifer. I am so excited, and I can't wait to hear how that goes. I mean, it's yeah, it sounds like you've been so thoughtful and intentional about the how to set it up, and I think that that's phenomenal.
What I hear is there are 5 million adoptees in the United States. That's 10 million birth parents, ostensibly speaking, and yet you don't know each other. 10 million of you out there. And what it seems like is wanting to connect with each other, hearing each other's voices. There are, don't know how many adoptive parents, but they've found each other. They have networks, they have supports, they have places they can go. And that feels really lonely to me, hearing that. And so it's really exciting when I hear something like Jennifer saying, I wanted this, I couldn't find it, so I created it. It's not easy though, which is why I'm like in awe and just revere that, because I can imagine that, Rita, why people might not attend those support groups is it must take just a lot of strength to get there, to choose to go, to show up.
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with scheduling, or, they're just not feeling it, or whatever the case is. I know for me, I went like 2 weeks after my child was born, and I went through while I was pregnant. So, I mean, it's a choice that, yes, that I go, but it's been important to my healing.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap up, but I want to give each of you a chance to say anything else on your mind before we close.
Just want to honor all of your ladies' emotional labor that you've poured into this. I know it's not always easy to talk about these tiny beings that we love so much from afar. So I encourage you to do self-care after this, whatever that may look like for you. In communal care, reach out to your support systems and tell them, I just had a really emotionally taxing evening. This is how you can love me well.
Is there anything else you want these adoptive and foster parents to know?
We are loving mothers. We don't
What was
forget.
that?
We are loving mothers, and we don't forget about our children. If in a perfect world where adoption still had to exist, I would wish that it was just a marriage where two families were blending into each other to take care of a child, and not a family taking care of a child and another family going into the shadows.
That speaks to my heart and my real honest view of, how that's my slant of, quote, I guess, how it should be. And I understand that there are oftentimes very real barriers, for a number of different reasons, to have complete openness. And what does that mean? But I think, just like you said, we don't forget. And I think in whatever way you can share with those birth parents that you haven't forgot them, that's huge. It's invaluable.
even though I'm in a closed adoption, for the first about decade of my daughter's life, they left their profile on Facebook open. I don't know if they did that on purpose or not, but I like to think that they did.
Mm.
So I understand that Facebook's not an authentic representation of my daughter's life, really is like. But it gave me a little glimpse, this little bit of hope that, I did make the right decision. She is happy. She is healthy. She's doing well. And these people are loving her well.
Mm.
So even if you do have a closed adoption, you don't necessarily know who these people are or where they are. I would encourage you to not completely shut the door to them. Leave room for them, because you might find that we're wonderful people.
I would say for adoptive parents to reach out to the birth parents and kind of ask what they need for support. I think oftentimes it's really not intentional, that they may not remember, a picture goes a long way or a comment goes a long way. For me, I think with my brother and my sister-in-law, anytime I would get a picture unasked for, it was, oh, they remembered. So it's a lot better than I always have to ask for something.
Yeah.
And I also think that yes, it's a journey, I think, in forging that relationship and to be intentional on, how to support and how to love well.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap, I would like to know how each of you are doing emotionally with this, spending an hour talking, thinking about your child, about that time. Let's see, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 means I am going to go collapse on my bed and someone needs to bring me Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Or 10, like, I could go run a marathon. Like, where is your energy?
3, I would say.
3.
A little draining.
And is that just, is it an okay thing for you? I think spending emotional energy on this, it doesn't mean that it's bad to be drained, especially if you feel cared for after. And sometimes it can feel even good. What does that mean? What does a 3 mean for you?
It means I'm okay, but just drained. I have talked about it before, but not been asked the hard questions, I guess. Like, usually at like a support group, it would be, we just say what we want. It wouldn't be, we have to think about, intentional questions, I guess.
I would say my gut was to split right in the middle at a 5, but I would probably lean more towards 4 with Ben & Jerry's, because I'll never decline Ben & Jerry's. In my 4 means it's like a somber feeling. It's very just reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's always work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a heaviness, there's a heaviness, there's a grief that's right at the surface, and it's more palpable than if we're not doing the hard work of reflecting and talking about the hard questions. So yeah, 4 and Ben & Jerry's is what I'm at.
I'd say I'm probably at a 7, and this is coming from a space of I'm 16 years out, almost 17. I've had a lot of time to process. I've written a book, so I do a lot of public speaking on this. So this is not something that's super, super draining towards me or to me. Definitely, it does take emotional labor on my part. I have found in the past that I can talk once and I'm fine. If I have to talk again, like some retreats have multiple sessions, that second time I have to tell my audience, you are seeing me flipping my lid right now because I am triggered. I am traumatized. So you'll have to give me grace in this. But right now, just talking about this once, I would say a 7.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, being 16 years out, you've learned over those 16 years how to care for yourself in these times, which makes it that way. Okay. Is your book right behind you?
It's right beside me, and yeah, right behind me.
Yeah.
It's all over.
What is the book? Can you show us?
Yeah, it is called Fireweed. So fireweed is this really beautiful pinkish purple flower that shows up after the devastation of a forest fire. So it's through these ashes that this beauty comes. So it is literally a tangible Isaiah 61:3, where it talks about God wants to give us beauty from ashes.
Wow.
And for me, that was my adoption story.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the adoptive and foster families really listening to what you've shared, what the gift that you've given, honoring you as individuals, and also allowing themselves to see their kids' birth parents in each of you and humanizing them. That perhaps the thinking of their birth parents as criminals because they committed a crime, or as scary because there's a lot of unknowns, or as an addict and as only an addict and not also someone who loves Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that I hope that they can see each of you for that, and therefore perhaps change or continue in their lifestyle that they've created for their adopted children. So that if that can be done, that is a gift to the next generation. So thank you all.